The tension in the room was palpable, the weight of Rasheeda's words hanging in the air like a thick fog. For years, she had lived behind the mask of a perfect marriage, standing by Kirk's side through the highs and lows. No one knew what really went on behind closed doors. She had kept quiet, convinced herself that this was just part of the deal. That if she just loved him enough, if she stayed strong enough, things would get better. But they didn't. And now, here she was, finally facing the world with the truth. "I never thought I'd be sitting here saying this," Rasheeda said, her voice trembling as she began to speak into the camera. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, but the nerves were evident. This wasn't easy. "For years, I told myself it wasn't that bad, that I was overreacting, that if I just loved him enough, if I stayed strong enough, things would get better. But they never did." The raw honesty in her voice struck a chord with everyone watching. It was clear that this wasn't just another reality TV drama. This was real. Real pain, real hurt, and real betrayal. The weight of her silence had been unbearable for years, and now the moment had come to let the world know the truth. As she spoke, the comments on social media started to flood in. Fans were shocked, devastated, and heartbroken. They had always admired Kirk and Rasheeda's relationship. It had been one of the most iconic couples on Love and Hip Hop, and they were always presented as the power duo. But now, everything had changed. Some fans stood by Rasheeda, applauding her courage for speaking out. Others questioned why it had taken so long for her to finally break her silence. Why had she stayed quiet for all these years? What had stopped her from walking away earlier? But as the video went viral, a much darker side to this situation started to emerge. Kirk, who was completely unaware of Rasheeda's decision to speak out, was left blindsided. His phone began to blow up with calls, texts, and notifications. When he finally checked his social media, his heart dropped. The headline was everywhere. "Rasheeda breaks silence. Kirk Frost accused of abuse." It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under him. Kirk was in shock. He was confused and angry. How could Rasheeda do this to him? The video was going viral, and it was clear that things were about to get ugly. He picked up his phone and called her, his voice shaking with anger. "What the hell is this?" he shouted into the phone, but Rasheeda didn't answer. Instead, she let the silence speak for itself. Kirk was left to stew in his rage. He didn't know what to do, so he did the only thing he could think of. He went live on Instagram. He tried to do damage control, but it was clear from the start that no one was buying it. He paced back and forth, visibly frustrated as he tried to defend himself. "Look, man, Rasheeda and I have been through a lot," he started, shaking his head. "But this ain't what it looks like." His attempt to spin the story back in his favor fell flat. Rasheeda had finally found her voice, and the world was listening. The truth had come out, and no amount of excuses or damage control was going to change that. The more Kirk tried to talk, the more his words seemed to make the situation worse. "You think you're the victim now?" Rasheeda's voice interrupted his live stream. "After everything you put me through, now you want to act like I'm the one in the wrong? You made me feel crazy for years, Kirk. You controlled me, manipulated me, and then acted like it was all my fault." Rasheeda's words hit like a ton of bricks. She wasn't pulling any punches. She was done protecting him, and the world was finally seeing Kirk for what he really was. A man who had betrayed his wife, humiliated her in front of millions, and now tried to play the victim. As the internet erupted, Kirk's response only made things worse. He attempted to downplay the severity of the situation, calling Rasheeda's confession exaggerated. He couldn't understand why she was speaking out now, after everything they had been through. But Rasheeda wasn't backing down. She had spent too many years suppressing her truth, and now she was ready to speak. The fallout was massive. Fans were furious with Kirk, and even some of his closest friends began to turn their backs on him. Scrappy, a close friend of both Kirk, and Rasheeda confronted him, telling him straight up, "This ain't just some cheating scandal, Kirk. She said you hit her. You know what that means." Kirk didn't have an answer. The silence spoke volumes. Scrappy looked at him with disappointment. "You can't keep playing games, man. You know what you did." But the drama didn't stop there. As the news spread, Rasheeda's family began to speak out. Her mother, Shirlene, had always been suspicious of Kirk, and when she saw the video, she didn't hold back. "That man ain't never been good for you, Rasheeda," she said over the phone. "You've been too loyal to him, and now look at what he's done." Rasheeda couldn't deny it anymore. Her mother's words hit home. She had sacrificed her happiness, her dignity, and her self-worth for a marriage that had never truly been what she thought it was. She had stayed quiet for so long, but now it was clear. The truth had to be told. Late one night, the final blow came. Love and Hip Hop officially announced that Kirk Frost was being removed from the show. The network had made their decision, after careful consideration, and it was clear they couldn't continue to support someone with such serious allegations hanging over his head. Kirk's career was in ruins. His reputation was shattered, and the world was turning against him. Meanwhile, Rasheeda had found her strength. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. She launched a foundation focused on empowering women, particularly those who had suffered in silence, just like she had. She was turning her pain into power, and no one could take that from her. But Kirk wasn't ready to give up just yet. He made a last-ditch effort to fight back, posting desperate messages on social media, trying to paint himself as the victim. "They're trying to destroy me," he posted. "But nobody's perfect. I've made mistakes, but I'm not the monster they're making me out to be." The comments were brutal. No one was buying his excuses anymore. "A monster? You've had plenty of chances to change, Kirk. And you didn't," one commenter wrote. "Rasheeda deserves better. She deserves peace." Then, the unthinkable happened. Kirk's own son, Kirk Jr., broke his silence on Instagram. "I watched my mom suffer in silence for years," he said, his voice quiet but powerful. "And I'm done being quiet. She deserved better. She still does." The internet exploded. Fans were in disbelief, and even Kirk's most loyal supporters began to turn their backs on him. The truth had come out, and there was no going back. Rasheeda, on the other hand, was finally free. She had spoken her truth, and the world was listening. Her foundation was growing, and her voice was stronger than ever. She had reclaimed her life, her happiness, and her power. But what about Kirk? Was this really the end for him? Or was he planning a comeback? Fans were divided. Some believed he had already lost everything, while others thought he might try to redeem himself. But one thing was for sure. The story wasn't over. There were still secrets to be uncovered, and the drama wasn't going anywhere. The world was watching, and everyone wanted to know what Kirk's voice was filled with rage. "You ain't gonna leaving Rasheeda. You think you got people on your side now, but they'll turn on you just like that. You act without me. Remember that." Asterisk, asterisk. The internet erupted. This wasn't just an argument. This wasn't just a toxic relationship. This was abuse. And now everyone saw Kirk for who he really was. Celebrities started speaking out. "Rasheeda, we stand with you. No woman should ever feel trapped in a relationship like this." Even love and hip-hop stars who had previously stayed silent were now calling for Kirk to be permanently removed from the show. And then the final blow came. Love and Hip Hop officially announced that Kirk Frost had been fired. After careful consideration and in light of recent allegations, Kirk Frost will no longer be a part of Love and Hip Hop. Atlanta Rashima saw the announcement pop up on her phone and just stared. It was over. For the first time in years, she felt free. Rasheeda sat in her bedroom staring at the screen of her phone as the news spread like wildfire. Kirk Frost had officially lost everything. Love and Hip Hop had severed all ties. Major brands were pulling their endorsements, and social media was eating him alive. His reputation was in shambles, and there was no saving it. But instead of feeling victorious, Rasheeda felt something else. Something unexpected: relief for the first time in years. She could breathe without feeling the weight of his presence looming over her. She had spent so long suffering in silence, convincing herself that things would get better, that Kirk would change. But now she knew the truth. He never would. She let out a shaky breath as her phone vibrated in her hand. A message from an unknown number. "You happy?" Now her stomach twisted. She didn't need to ask who it was from. She knew for a moment. She considered ignoring it, but then anger flared inside her. No, he didn't get to make her feel guilty. He didn't get to twist the narrative. Not anymore. She typed out a response. I'm free now. That's all that matters." She could send, and then she blocked the number. But Kirk wasn't done yet. The next morning, his face flooded social media. He had gone live on Instagram, his voice heavy, his demeanor defeated. But instead of apologizing, instead of taking accountability, he played the victim. "I ain't even gonna lie, man. I lost everything. My wife, my career, my respect. But let me tell you all something. Something ain't nobody perfect. Yeah, I made mistakes, but they try to make me out. To be a monster, that ain't fair. The comments were brutal. A monster. Kirk, the receipts are there. You had ERS to change. You're just mad. You got caught. Rasheeda deserves better, period. Fans weren't.